just got a haircut.
Wow.
You're supposed to remind me about these. That was interesting.
Oh, it's on delay. There's probably like a 30 seconds of delay. Jeez, you have to pull
Ah.
a pin on something.
Yeah.
Well, in case the meeting gets too colorful.
Yeah, okay, so welcome everyone, including those of you that may be watching our YouTube live channel here. I'd like to welcome you all to our final meeting of 2023. It certainly has been an interesting year. And just to start, can we go around the table so everyone is familiar with where everybody is and who everybody is? And Carol, could you start with that, please?
Carol Magnan, committee member. Diane Gerhart, committee member.
Carrie Tuckett, deafblind support worker, committee member. Lisa Bezo Allen, Ward 2 and council representative with the city.
John McConnell, I'm the chair. I guess that's what I am. I'm the chair, committee chair. Go ahead, Steve.
Steve Zuba, junior planner, planning department of the city.
Wayne Scharpenberg, committee member.
Steve Zupa from the planning department of the city.
Fred Kohler, committee member.
Sierra Zamora, to support.
Derek Rowley, committee member.
Peter Tenazo with the Sioux St. Clair Planning Department.
And Stephanie Perry, leading.
And Diane Morale, accessibility coordinator.
Thank you, everyone. Let's do two things first and see if we can deal with them fairly quickly. One is approval of the minutes of our last meeting. Did everyone have a chance to go through those minutes? Great, you have a question?
No, I just wanted to move adoption. Sure.
We have a mover for approving the minutes of our last meeting. We have a seconder, Derek. Thank you very much. Are there any questions or additions? I don't see anybody. Everybody seems to be nodding their head. Can we have a vote on that, please? All in favor?
Aye.
That's carried. And the other thing is our declaration of conflict of interest. I think I've only been here for a year now, but we've never actually had a declaration of a conflict of interest, but it is important to ask the question. And that is there anything on the agenda that anyone will be participating in or may participate in that would result in a financial benefit to you or a member of your immediate family? Does anyone have any conflicts of interest? And seeing none, we're going to charge ahead. And we have Peter Chinazzo, who's our planning director, with us today. We also have Steve Zupa. And Peter, I understand Steve's doing a presentation on Grow the Sioux.
Yeah.
So Steve, if I can turn this
Sure.
over to you.
Thank
And
you.
welcome, by the way. Welcome
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us here today, folks. And Peter, if you want to interject on anything, you're more than to, of course, on this. Yeah. So I'm going to talk about the Grow the Sioux projects that we're kind of undertaking at the Sault Ste. Marie Planning Department. So we know, we've looked at the data, we know now that Sault Ste. Marie is actually experiencing a period of expansion and growth and development. Probably a bit different than we've had in the last, say, 20 years or so, where our population is somewhat stagnated, declines. We're starting to see that population rise again. So with that comes obviously opportunities and some challenges as well. So Grow the Sioux, the projects that are grouped under Grow the Sioux, basically they're ongoing initiatives, strategic plans that are designed to ensure that this growth occurs in a sustainable, efficient, beneficial manner. So the key components of this Grow the Sioux projects or initiatives under Grow the Sioux, I've got them listed here, I'll go through them. Most of them do relate to housing development. So that's kind of what Grow the Sioux is focusing on at this time. So the housing action plan is one. So if you watch council on Monday, the housing action plan was actually approved by council. So this is one that's kind of fresh. And it really encompasses many of the other key components that are on that slide as well. So the housing action plan basically contains the strategic actions, goals that the city can undertake to accelerate the construction of new housing units. And with that is included things like financial incentives for housing. So financial incentives to develop new housing units. What we're hearing from developers, it's very expensive to build units. There's not much that are being built lately, so we want to make sure we can take some actions to accelerate housing development in the city, because we know we have to grow for that population that's coming here, that wants to come here, so. The housing action plan contains, like I said, many of those initiatives below. So one thing that we're calling strategic development areas or nodes. We want to focus or direct higher density development or housing developments to areas that are basically equipped to accommodate that kind of growth. So they have the essential services, infrastructure, transportation options like public transportation, as well as active transportation. They're on that active transportation network. And they have access within a safe walkable distance to other types of amenities, like say a grocery store or commercial retail clusters, that type of thing, schools, parks, and those types of amenities. It makes sense to focus higher density growth in areas that have these kind of services nearby in a walkable distance. There's another component that we call general density and regulatory flexibility. So it's looking at kind of approvals process, like putting more higher density development, housing development in a wider variety of housing types within existing neighborhoods. So things like additional dwelling units or kind of a second unit within a pre-existing home, like a garden suite, building a small home in the backyard or somewhere else on the property. It could be allowing more units on a single property as well, so up to say 4 units per property, that type of thing. And we'll go into these in a little more detail through the presentation. Another thing that we're looking at are reduced parking requirements. So reviewing parking requirements for say commercial, residential, all those types of developments to identify opportunities for reductions. So the kind of the idea behind that is reducing parking requirements, less parking, and thereby unlocking kind of more space to build housing, that type of thing. And one thing I won't quite get into in this presentation is the active transportation master plan. So looking at safe walkable distance, cycling, that sort of thing, and making sure areas within our city have access to that transportation. So the city applied for housing accelerator fund through CMHC. So if you've heard of that one, it's a $4 billion fund that the federal government put out for municipalities to apply for just initiatives like we're talking about to accelerate the development of housing within cities. So we did apply to that, and one of the requirements to complete that application was to undertake a housing needs assessment. So look at all the data related to housing in our community and see what the housing needs were. So the information on this slide, which I'll kind of go through with the key points of it, basically it helps us, it informs us on the needs of the housing in the community, how needs are changing over time. So an example of that would be looking at the effects of the aging population in our city, kind of the different types of housing that may be required as the population ages. And whether that population is choosing to say age in place, or if they're looking to move into different types of apartments, like single level apartments, that type of thing. We want to keep this information up to date and use this data in the future to examine, say, changing trends over time, and to potentially look at, what the impacts of the policy changes that we're proposing here are having on the city. So the needs assessment has a lot of data. Actually, if anybody wants to take a look, I do have a copy of the needs assessment here. If anybody wants to have a look, but basically some of the key points or key findings we had, obviously the population is growing. We did see that the data does point to that. Since about 2018, the population has started to rise again. There's a blip at the beginning of COVID as the population declined a bit, but the growth that we're seeing is coming from migrants, so people coming from either other parts of Ontario, other parts of Canada, or other parts of the world. We're getting quite a few international immigrants coming in as well. And the difference is we're getting more people coming in than people that are leaving, basically. We're not growing naturally. We have basically births versus deaths. For every, more or less, for every birth in the community, there are 2 deaths. That's kind of the ratio. So we're not growing naturally, we're growing through migration. So what we're seeing is, looking at projections, we're over the next 15 years, we're expecting or projecting the city to grow by about 8,000 people, give or take. So we need housing to accommodate that growth. It's not enough is being built to accommodate that. So if we don't build enough to accommodate that growth will be throttled. We're missing an opportunity. We see that household sizes are getting smaller, which means there are less people living per unit per household. And that speaks to somewhat of an aging population as well. Back in the day, there were probably 3 or 4 people per houses, when people had large families, younger families, and as children move out, have empty nesters, and basically that kind of look at the whole city, that number drops. So right now we're at about 2 persons per household in the community. So one of the things that gets mentioned is with the population dropping, why do we, not have homes for people to live in? It's because kind of the population's spread out into homes. We found that the local housing stock is old. I guess you see percentage of units built before 1980 or 75%. I was born in 1980. I don't feel old, but for housing units, yeah, that kind of hurts a little bit. Yeah, for sure.
I was in high school in
Yeah.
18.
Well, the fund number is 19.
Right.
But, and then, but, yeah.
Yeah,
That's,
so in terms of housing stock, however,
yeah.
1980, I mean, over the course of the kind of the life of a house, particular repairs are needed. If a home's built in 1980 and hasn't been maintained that well, then that housing stock can be in a state of disrepair. So we're finding, not all are like that, but we're finding that, 2-3/4 of the homes built in Sault Ste. Marie were built before 1980. Household incomes are increasing, not as fast as the province, so the incomes are going up. But there's quite a discrepancy between household incomes in Sault Ste. Marie at about 73,000 per household versus Ontario, which is about 91,000 per household. So there's quite a difference. And household resale or housing resale prices has really risen in the last 5 years or 6 years. It's gone up by over 80%. So it's considerable, and that's across the board too. So that's for all of Ontario, all of Canada, and that's really why housing has become somewhat unaffordable for families. And it really, that kind of home ownership market is kind of cut off for a lot of families as well. Oh, yeah.
So both the planners in the room and Jerry, if you want to chime. I've heard the term affordable housing bandied about 8 ways to Sunday.
Yep.
Is there a functional definition of that?
No,
Okay, that's,
so there's a lot of different definitions, which I think is part of the problem.
Gotcha.
For us, when we use the term affordable housing for planning purposes.
yes, sir.
Think of it as missing middle housing, so it's
Gotcha.
those folks that may not make enough money to afford the rent or to buy a house. But they make too much money to qualify for subsidies,
Ontario, the
so that's what we term.
housing division, of my sister's office.
Yes.
Subsidized.
Or any kind of, whether it's a rent subsidy or an income subsidy, they make too much to qualify for that, but they don't make enough to be able to afford.
Gotcha. Okay, no, it's,
Peter, I should have asked you guys. I take it you're okay with getting questions as a president.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. I always thought that was the best way to do it.
Yes,
I don't think this has to be.
no, we haven't changed
super
that.
formal.
All right.
just that, thank you. With this, Chairman, thank you for that. With this group of people, I wanted to see if there was a function, like there are. Every agency has its own definition, and it's a dog's breakfast to try and follow the discussion. Thank you.
Derek, go ahead.
Okay, I had a comment and a question. Basically what's happening with the older sidewalk, if they're narrowed and stuff like that, a wheelchair my size may not fit it. And like, let's say a person comes on a scooter and a mother comes with a child with a stroller. what is our plan through you, Mr. Chair? To Mr. Canazzo, what is our plan for the infrastructure of that?
That's a good question, that's a big question too. So I think hopefully when you look through this and you look at sort of nodes and corridors, strategic development areas. It's a little bit of a change in thinking, so. You know, if a developer were to come to us and say, I wanna build 40 dwelling units in a new subdivision, it's gonna have new roads, new sidewalks. They're obviously gonna be built to a better standard. But when you look at sort of when you're adding new linear infrastructure, the city's inheriting all that linear infrastructure. And really, that's the way we've always done things. So I'll be honest, we wouldn't bat an eye at that, right? We would. So yeah, you build, we'll take the road, we'll add the plows, we'll collect the garbage. Whereas what we're trying to shift that to is to take these strategic development areas and these nodes within the city and sort of build from within and build up density in those areas. And I think the shift or the focus is that instead of, let's say, taking on new infrastructure and inheriting the costs of that, instead of doing that, what you're doing is you're maybe improving some of the infrastructure that's beside that area, right? So our goal is that we're gonna drive density and that we're gonna change from building new roads, plowing new roads, collecting new garbage, and change that over to, okay, we're gonna replace sidewalks, we're gonna replace the intersection at Northern and Great Northern Road because it is absolutely not accessible on a lot of different levels. So the goal is that we can create that tax base and create that revenue on existing areas and then improve that infrastructure as opposed to building new infrastructure. That's the goal.
So it's not gonna happen in the next year or two, but
Well, I think you're gonna see it happening in those areas. If we see that growth from within, I think you're gonna see it happening, but it is a change in the way that we are currently and previously been doing things a little bit.
I just wanted, because there's a lot of strollers, there's a lot of even people coming with a single, coming with a buggy. Well, if there's a family of 10, that family of 10 can't fit on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
So,
Okay,
and the way the sidewalks are now, they're on a hill. Basically,
In some areas, yes.
so there you go.
Okay.
Thank you.
So like ownership housing, it's gone up, obviously rental rates, rental housing, the price has gone up as well, so. Kind of the middle box on the right shows that rental rates have gone up over 50% between 2011 and 2022. And really the data that we have looks at kind of all rental units within the community. It doesn't look at just units that are available right now. So that number is probably quite low. If you're actually looking for a rental unit right now, it's probably quite beyond that. I'm looking at a rental rate for a 2-bedroom or 1-bedroom, $1,200 to $1,500 a month, not including utilities. So it's gotten extremely high. So some of this data is a little bit dated as well, or it doesn't consider kind of everything, but we're a bit limited to what we have. But what we do know is that rental rates have gone up considerably and considerably higher than, say, the average income during that time for a rental household. So people are paying more rental and they're making the gap between their wage and their rental rate is getting bigger.
So,
Would your objective be, like in the old days, 30% of your wages?
Yes.
Rather than like right
Yeah.
now, people are below that and struggling because the rent's here and they're.
Right, so that's typically how kind of the affordability is calculated for. What if you're in housing that you can afford, you're paying 30% or less for all your shelter costs, which is rent plus utilities and that.
Right.
So if you're paying over, I have another stat on here, basically rental households paying over that.
So much.
Yeah, there's a lot, there's actually, I mean, it says 14% here, they're considered to be in poor housing need or considered to not be in affordable housing. So all rental households that don't receive subsidy, 14% are struggling with that. That number's probably low, and it's still 14% actually does mean like a couple thousand households.
And seniors on fixed income.
Yeah.
Which is. And now we're paying 45% of our
Yes. absolutely.
income. And the thing is, well, you just need food, so don't worry about it. Yeah. Probably true, we not driving anymore, car repairs, et cetera, so it's. I still think that's not fair.
No, absolutely.
So Steve, just to put dollar amounts to it, we have 2022 numbers, the affordable rent, what we deem to be like missing middle affordable rent is.
Caps out at, I think, 1,015.
It's a little over $1,000 is what we deem to be affordable, and we know what we're hearing, people that are building new apartments and whatnot, it's like 2,000. And more.
And that includes utilities as well, so just over 1,000 rent plus utilities, which if you were again looking for a place right now to rent, you'd be hard pressed to find.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
And hopefully they'll make more seniors, I'm at the finished rest home now, but more things or units like that where
Yes.
it sounds very good there, very good.
Steve, I'm curious, so the affordable rent is just over $1,000 per month now in Sault Ste. Marie.
According to the provincial policy.
According to the provincial policy, right? How does that stack up against the provincial average, do you know?
Provincial average? No, I'm not sure what it would be for the province.
I'm thinking, I know we have that stat from 2018 in the background report, how we stacked up. I don't know how that out of touch with the rest of the province.
Not on rents.
In terms of ownership or like housing resale prices, we're considerably lower, but for rental, the gap is not quite as large.
Also with geared to income housing, which, forget it, the list is so long, like.
Yes,
Take into the population of just people
absolutely.
qualifying for geared to income, and they just look at, and more people are opting out of geared to income. And
Yeah.
the finished restaurant is one of them too, where they don't have to do that anymore, and it's gonna be.
For sure. Yeah, so there's actually a stat from the DSAB, so the service system manager for the city for rent geared to income or social housing. There's 1,700 families on the wait list as of March 2023.
Isn't that breaking her?
It's huge, and it's between March 2020, I think, and March 2023 went up by about 400 households, so it's right considerably.
And that's households, not people,
Yeah.
Right.
so
And
on
yeah,
average, you take that.
down the road, nothing is gonna be really done for 10 years, like, I mean, it will be in progress. But
Oh,
for
well-
people to actually move into one of these units, they're talking 10
Yeah.
years.
Yeah, that's housing, the
I-
DSAB's housing stock has not risen that much, but there are other
Yeah,
opportunities.
there
right?
are, there are, like, we're still doing the home ownership pilot.
Right,
And DSAB and Housing Corp has been putting more attention on supportive housing. Especially with the transition units that we just opened up at the community resource.
What about the people that are in these buildings? That the landlords bought
right.
and probably gonna lose these buildings. Okay, and these people have lived in these buildings for years. And they're on a fixed income. ODSP.
Yeah.
Both, that kind of income. So if the landlord can't sell the building. And the bank takes it over, these people get kicked out of these apartments, where do they go? They have to start at the bottom of what did you say, how many people on the waiting list?
1,700 household for social help.
Bottom. Waiting 10 years to get on the list in the first place. They finally get on the list, affordable housing. They move in these apartments for 7 years. New owner takes it, probably gonna lose it, has it up for sale, nobody wants to buy it, they're probably gonna have to move out.
What apartment building are you talking about that's for sale?
Across from Food Basics.
Oh, the, on High Street?
Yeah.
That's privately owned.
Yeah.
Those are privately owned by
Yeah, you know,
it's a company.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, those
I know
aren't,
you-
those aren't part of the social housing stuff.
no, so Steve's, I think
But
Steve's
if
gonna,
they're in on portable housing though, living there on portable
Yeah.
housing.
Right.
no, I mean, there's landlord tenant rules, I don't
Yeah.
think they can just kick them out
No.
and say, okay, we're kicking you out because you're rent control, and this way we can get you.
They
people
actually
in."
can't, they can't do that.
I don't think they can do that, but
What it would have to do is give people. Notice so that they can start looking
But if there's
for a
no,
place.
but if there's no place to look. Yeah, there is no place.
that's the
Yeah,
issue,
that-
we have a shortage of housing, and that's.
I think Peter's correct here, though, just because you have a change in ownership, whether it goes from an owner to the bank, who immediately wants to get rid of it again, because the banks aren't in the property management business, or if it goes from an owner to another owner, it doesn't change the tenant's protection under the landlord and tenant.
But only if they
Okay.
intend to renovate
Yeah.
it. then they can-
Exactly, and that's probably what'll end up happening at that. Then they'll have to-
They can't do people into them?
The townhouses in the east end, they were charged, 1,500 rent. And they sold it to. Forgot their name, of course. And now they came in and they raised everybody's rent $500.
Yeah, so those, my understanding is rent control doesn't apply to anything that was built before,
Oh, after
Exactly.
2018.
after 2018, and
Yeah.
I'm thinking. Yeah,
And now they're up the creek. And they have no place to go.
Let's press on here and let Steve finish this part of the presentation.
For sure.
Yeah.
Right.
So one last point I just wanted to make, just kind of driving up these rental rates, there, because of the demand, the vacancy rate has gone way down. So the vacancy rate is currently sitting at about 2% or under 2%, which is considerably low. It's considered to be a healthy vacancy rate is typically 3 to 5% of units vacant, whereas we're below that. So that's telling us there's high demand for units. That's why these prices are going up and up and up. And it's telling us, basically, all this is telling us we need more rental housing, we need more affordable housing, we need more freehold housing. We just need more housing to make these things better, to help out kind of all these stats. So we built a housing action plan, basically in conjunction with the Affordable Housing Task Force that was put together by council. Basically to do just that, just kind of what we're talking about, to get us what the city can do, how we can help get new housing built, make things easier, provide financial incentives to build housing. Increase basically the number of housing, the units available in the community. And provide better incentives for building specifically affordable housing. So build market housing, get a lot of housing built affordable specific housing should help all those indicators, should help rent, should help vacancy rate, should kind of help everything out. What we're focusing on though, that kind of graphic up there shows basically what's called the housing continuum. So basically kind of from homelessness, emergency shelters, supportive housing, subsidized housing, and then what we're focusing on in this plan, which would be affordable housing, market rate housing, or market rental housing, and market home ownership housing. So that's the primary focus of this plan. With that saying that the DSUB is the social service system manager for the city, where they're kind of in that space. Homelessness to subsidized housing space. They're also in the affordable housing space, so there is some overlap there, which is good because the DSUB can take advantage of the opportunities presented in this plan as well, as can other agencies like Ontario Aboriginal Housing Services. They're in that realm as well, so they can take advantage of what's provided in this plan.
yeah, so just to be clear, when Steve goes through the various incentives that we're looking at. DSAB, Ontario Aboriginal Housing, community living Algoma to a degree, I think, the various social service providers that are in that housing space that's sort of left of affordable housing, if you will, they can take advantage of those subsidies just like everybody else.
Okay, can I, because this is the
Absolutely.
point I was trying to get at, okay, so, I own my house, I've got property in my backyard. So financial incentive or whatever, could I get that to build a secondary whatever in my yard?
Yes, that's the idea, yeah. So that would fit in kind of, I'll go through the general density, but the idea is, yeah, to make it possible to do that. Kind of release or relax some of the regulations against that, and then provide an incentive.
What we call per door grants. You could get a per door, you could get a grant. Of X number of dollars, let's say anywhere from 20 to 45,000, $50,000 to put. A second unit, whether it's in your house, behind your house. Those kinds of things.
Now, does the secondary unit or whatever have to be for somebody with a disability?
It doesn't,
Okay,
but nothing's stopping you from creating
meaning
it out.
the homeowner. So I think, if I wanted to, I don't know, last year, thinking about adding on to my house, get an apartment in, or adding on or whatever. And, I read up somewhere that I own the house. So I can't qualify for this financial assistance because I'm the owner of the house. And the
Right.
people that would be moving into the second unit. They're
Yeah,
not,
yeah,
do you know what?
for sure, so, yeah.
This program wouldn't preclude. Being a homeowner would, I think you probably need to do that. You need to be the owner in order to qualify for it. Yeah.
I feel like a four.
Three. Yeah, potentially, depending on how you meet the performance standards. We'll get into that.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, sure.
Carol's thinking, she's gonna be
Yeah.
doing the drawing.
Carol, make sure that you get the information that they talked about,
Okay,
and then
perfect.
I can
Mhm,
actually
for sure.
need further information.
Okay, cause I have gotten pulled in my.
So like I mentioned, the housing action plan contains a number of goals and basically strategic actions to more or less get housing built, make it easier to get housing built in the community. So the first goal was kind of the biggest one, the more meat of it. It's increase the housing to supply to meet demand and address affordability issues. So basically get more housing. So there's a few actions underneath that, which I'll talk about in a minute, one of which is establish strategic development areas, which is another kind of project, Grow the Sioux. And another one is provide mechanisms for residential intensifications, that kind of a technical way of saying this general density and adding units in kind of apartment built neighborhoods, which I'll talk about later too. Kind of a big one under this goal, it's really gonna make this happen is providing those financial incentives for housing, like we were saying. That's one, and then where we're saying advanced housing on government land, more or less making surplus city lands available for construction, affordable housing. The municipal, the city's looking at implementing a community improvement plan or a CIP to kind of get those funds out there, and what we're looking at including is municipal fees rebate program. So, for example, you have to. There's planning fees related to, say, rezoning your property or something like that. We're looking at rebating those, so somebody doesn't have to pay for that.
The big one would be the building
Building
permit fees.
For sure, so for larger, apartment buildings, those building permits can be considerable, right, $100,000, for example. Giving a rebate for that. Or a tax increment equivalent grant, so if you have a vacant piece of land and you build an apartment building, the tax for that property gets really high, and a tax increment equivalent grant kind of mitigates that over time, so you're not paying 100% increase the first year, it's maybe a 20% increase, and 25% over time grows to 100% tax, so it reduces kind of that tax impact right off the hop. And then the per door grants like we were talking about, so you're creating, maybe you're gonna build a 3-plex or a triplex. You could get, a specific dollar amount for each unit that you put on that property, so that would be a per door grant, say. Don't quote me, but say $30,000 per unit.
Per main door,
Yeah,
main door.
and it's just don't
It tends to be these tax increment equivalent grants, which we have a pretty successful program right now that we run. Those tend to be for larger developments, and then the per door grants are for usually something resulting in 4 units or less. So more your, what we call gentle density, which would be, I want to put a basement unit in my, or in my house, or, you know, a carriage house in the backyard, those.
Like a granny flat,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
or a 20-year-old kid that still lives with you,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah.
close, but not too close. Yeah,
And then we're also looking at, say, feasibility study grants for not-for-profits. So say there's you might have heard the mayor speak about the new foundations program that happened in Barrie, so we're looking at mimicking that. So say you have a not-for-profit or like a good example is a church that has a big piece of land. And, you know, they want to build some housing on it. It's actually paying for a feasibility study grant for them to look at, to see if that would work out, if it was feasible, viable to do that. So getting that for free, so just kind of opening up more land and potentially making it so they don't have to rezone that land for that housing as well.
Derek, go ahead.
Have we heard anything about the old general hospital, if anybody is going to successfully try to build something on it?
Nope.
And I got another question. The Kingsman Club used to build a house and do a draw on that. Do you still have that happening in the zoo where?
It hasn't been years, yeah.
So it's just basically have cat for family that's.
Habitat is, and then Housing Corp is too, Derek, so we're taking homes that we're not building from ground up, we're taking homes and renovating,
Okay,
and then selling them through our home ownership file as well. We got
And then-
funding to do 6 or 9,
6, yeah,
we got 900,000 to do 6,
yeah.
I think that was.
And one thing that gained a lot of traction that we're gonna look at, and it's not without its risks. One thing that seemed to gain a lot of traction with the affordable housing, or the housing task force. And not many municipalities do it, and I think you'll see why, but. Where the municipality will actually come up with, and I think DSAP has this program already, where they'll come up with a no interest down payment loan.
Yeah.
So that they will give, so this is for people that can afford the mortgage, but they can't afford the down payment.
We roll it in.
And it's interesting, there's certainly risks that would go along with that, but it's interesting, and certainly, I think DSAB and OWAS.
And I'll pause,
Have
yes.
been pretty successful with that,
Yeah.
so
But
that's something that we're gonna,
Finances themselves,
yes.
they hold the mortgage, whereas with the home ownership pilot, you do
Yeah.
need to qualify for a bank.
And I'm hearing in Southern Ontario, maybe at some point they will move its way up here, but there are firms now that will do that, and I think they're like what they call shared equity firms, and then, I mean, you gotta be careful, because people are getting into sort of long-term arrangements and agreements, but they will provide you with a down payment for a stake in the equity of the home.
Dealing with a private.
Yeah. So,
So those are kind of in a nutshell, the financial incentives for housing. Like I said, the city applied for the Housing Accelerator Fund from CMHC, so we don't actually know how much we're getting through that fund. We expect to hear fairly soon. We did apply for, I think it was 8 to 9 million, so hopefully we get that much and we can kind of pour all that funding into these programs. That's the idea.
and then we know we're getting 1.2 million from the province.
That's right.
As well, and I should note, so in the housing, or maybe you're gonna get there with the support of the barrier free units.
Yeah, I did.
Okay,
So
so
go ahead. Yeah, it's fine.
well, we do have, so. Certainly as it relates to this group, right, you know, we don't know yet, there's a shortage of housing, and the shortage of barrier free units and affordable barrier free units, is that just a symptom of the housing shortage, or are barrier free units actually falling further and further behind? And I don't know that we've been able to figure that out yet, but we do have a task specifically in the housing action plan to look at that and potentially provide deeper incentives for people that provide more over and above the number of barrier free units that are required in the building code. But keeping in mind that we're not sure about the provincial funding. It might allow us to do that, but like the federal funding is quite specific to saying like, it's just about putting more homes out there. It doesn't really speak too much to anything else.
Can the city put limits on that then and say, we've got this much funds from the feds, we're gonna go here with this group and we're gonna go here with this group?
Yeah.
That gives the city a lot of authority.
Yeah.
That's a really.
It sounds like we
positive
can do that.
thing. Yeah.
Rick, sorry.
Go ahead, Craig.
That, Mr. Chair, to you to the planning gentleman. I suspect, I don't have evidence, but I suspect anecdotally, it's a question of the accessible units are just, I think they're more than a symptom. I don't know if our local developers know there's a market. Or they may not. It's not something that's been routinely done in Sault Ste. Marie. Because our housing stock was built prior to, the bulk of it, prior to these requirements. Well prior, 1980 was, accessibility features were in, and then that 75 to 85, they were in the building code, and then they were removed from 85, they were removed out of the building code for that 10-year period. So there's a change of government. Under the bridge. But I suspect our local development committee didn't think to add those units at the time. As the community ages, I suspect that thought may come up. The view on accessibility is, the closer it affects you, the sooner you remember. I have one other question. I am in a condo development that the late Howard Tishman built. He had planning permission for 24 units and only 8 got built. Would that property still have planning permission because it's 16 units? Not that I'm suggesting I would build them, I'm just wondering if the planning permission still exists.
I'd wanna look at it specifically.
Okay,
Probably, but I would wanna, like, generally planning approvals stay with the land.
Thank you, sir.
But we've made changes over the years.
Gotcha.
So,
No, I will follow up with you. Outside of this conversation, but that was the other question, because my neighbors and I have pondered that over coffee on the odd evening, because an 8-unit building is harder to fund than a 24-unit building. We wondered, would someone ever come in? I don't think anyone local would do it, but I'm just wondering if the planning permission still existed. It's like, it's a curious thing. I'd like to
give us a call.
I'll do that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry about the redirection.
Go ahead, Steve.
So the like I'm saying, financial incentives, we apply for that funding, so we don't really know what the numbers are, but we do know how we kind of want to tier these incentives based on where the development occurs. I'm going to talk about the strategic development areas in a minute, but kind of where geographically they're located in the city. Obviously, how many affordable units that development contains. If it's fully affordable, then obviously they're gonna get much better incentives, financial incentives for building it. And then whether it can stack with other incentives, whether you can get the municipal fees rebate and get, say, a per door grant on top of that. As well as the type of dwelling you propose, kind of the housing tenure, whether it's purpose-built rental housing or freehold housing. So we're gonna look at all of those things and build those into a community improvement plan to say, for this type of development, we get this dollar. So that's still yet to be determined. We'll kind of know a little bit more once we know what kind of funding we're looking at for this.
You can get into this, but I'm just curious, do you kind of differentiate? We have 1,700 families in needing housing. Do we actually break that down even further in terms of the needs are, our 1,000 people seniors and our 700 families with that need, 2 to 3 bedrooms, and do we break down the financial need of each of the groups of people as well when we're looking at?
For that list specifically, the DSAB would do that. They would know how many unit or how many bedrooms each family would require.
Yeah, no, I just see that the seniors' needs are so different from that of families, right? When you're looking at building an apartment building.
For sure.
My understanding, I've heard DSAP say this, and I think you've heard this too, Don, in that their market for 3 bedrooms, maybe that's changed since I've had the conversation. The market for 3 bedrooms was actually pretty low. It was a lot of 1-bedroom senior.
Yeah.
Demand.
We do this new house. It's gonna be a 4-bedroom house.
Okay,
Because we're seeing newcomers that are coming in
yeah,
that have larger families.
right.
So the new house that we're doing, we're gonna make it a 4-bedroom. But it's the house through the home ownership pilot,
Right, as
Yeah.
opposed to like the apartments that have been built.
correct, yeah,
And it's just a house,
correct, and the people buy it,
yeah.
yeah.
I guess what we're seeing are different, really a lot of multiple needs, families
Yeah.
and, yeah.
I think the biggest change is that we're now seeing more family needs than senior, right? Like the newcomers that are coming in. I think that's about much of the changing demographic.
Right.
Going by a lot of my groups. There was a lot of seniors in their home that would get out of their home if they had a place to
Yeah,
go.
Right.
And that would free up a whole lot of housing.
Yeah,
So priority for me would be to build seniors and.
the term now is, you know what they call it? Those seniors are overhoused. That's what they call it now.
What's unfortunate
Overhoused, which is actually,
not paying rent, but they're being shocked and, furnace repairs, their heating's gone up, the roof's leaking and people are taking advantage of it. They need someplace like an apartment where they don't have all that mess.
Yeah.
One friend, their snow removal, snowball from last year. Oh, well, it's at $900 this year. Like, you're on fixed income, where are you supposed to get that kind of money?
Yeah, it speaks.
So
to
if
the
they're in
lack
an
of-
apartment that saves them $1 and they're comfortable and safe and secure, and it frees up a whole family. Those people raise 4 kids in that house. Perfect.
yeah,
And not to sidetrack us, but their social life gets better too.
Yes.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Agreed, yeah, that's so
So
that,
for me, I'm priority seniors and.
You let us know, Diana is in favor of.
well, I think the
That makes sense.
priority, and the stats make the priority for us is rental housing.
Yeah.
That really is where the confidence in this community is rental housing. Which includes apartments. Yeah,
and there's other opportunities as well, if they want to, if they're not using the entire house, build a second unit within it, if they have the means. to-
Would the city own those apartments and have control all the time? Or would they sell it to like McDonald's and whatever? Who then, because it's been built, it's a new build, we can raise your rent.
this would be.
This would be the city, yeah.
Or decel could apply. to
Yes,
some
that's
as
a
well,
lot.
But it would be private sector and public housing corporation driven.
Yeah,
The city of Sault Ste. Marie is not in the housing business apart from,
yeah.
you know.
So the houses.
Yeah, I mean, what they say and what they do.
Well, if somebody's getting a deeper incentive because they're gonna maintain you know, X number of affordable units. There will be an agreement that they have to sign that says. These units will be affordable for X number of years, right? And it actually tends, when we're looking at, it's like 10 to 25 years.
Yeah.
Seems to be what the norm is for these things.
I got a question. Peter, actually, question and comment. Have you ever heard of supportive housing over respite? Peter, and is the city eligible to have an apartment building grandfathered to have a unit? So let's say a family wants to go away, or a boyfriend and husband wanna go away. And they wanna make sure that their adult, or young adult even, is taken care of. Is there an opportunity to look at that too, so that a parent, if they parent or guardian, if they need a break, they don't have to worry about taking care of the kids.
That would be through CLA, Derek, but also in the private sector. Cause I just toured the Windsor Park today.
You do it.
For the town.
Yeah.
They have respite rooms, at the Windsor Park residence as well. I know Collegiate Heights also,
Pathways.
and Pathway, yeah, I think they all of the
Visiting retirement homes.
I think they all have a short-term.
Yeah, but I'm talking about like one that is grandfathered reading to an apartment building.
Well, the city wouldn't do that, that would have to be CLA if you're talking about housing for people with disabilities or a housing court.
I think the follow-up there is to see
Yeah.
if, you know, as far as, you know, looking at supportive housing and having deeper incentives, that might be one thing that might get somebody a deeper incentive.
There's some there's potential here, but we need to.
We need to look at that, yeah.
It's also very expensive.
I'm not asking the city to look to it, I'm just saying like, could it be a way of future next, in the next year, could we keep that on our radar?
I like that idea.
I'm not asking for the city of Sault Marie to pay, you know, to do anything, just maybe, with CLA, March Gardens.
Yeah.
All the people that have left by, units, get together and discuss it, because when there's like people that are teenagers and parents just need to take the time off,
Mhm.
and you don't know what I mean.
Yeah.
How to leave your kid with somebody because
Mhm.
they're not trained on the care.
Yeah, no, I agree.
An information gap, right?
Mhm.
Some of the private operators have the spaces, but they don't have the expertise. There's a gap.
There's a gap.
You've identified a gap, my friend.
Okay, so that's,
That's the.
so I'm not asking this, or not asking the city to pay for anything.
No, but
If you guys come to the table, I would even bring it forward.
that would be housing court, Derek, and that's something I can bring up at housing court.
Okay,
Somewhere in. Like when I read it, you had the maps and everything.
Right.
for Different areas.
Yep.
Some of them. I think it said something that the shopping, grocery store,
Right.
all that kind of stuff. Kind of like to get a little more information on that.
Yeah, you bet, for sure, that's coming up, absolutely. So we'll kind of, we'll skip through some, let's skip through, but kind of go through some of this stuff fairly quickly, I know, for the interest of time here. So
We have snacks for later, yes, we have to get through the presentation.
Yeah. So other goals of the action plan, one, streamlining the approvals process, so developing like an online application portal for building permits, applications to the city. Kind of communication back and forth with developers and homeowners and whatnot. It's all gonna be kind of integrated into one application, and we can use that data from it for reporting capabilities, for tracking, just kind of making that process a little bit more smoother. It's not like in Sault Ste. Marie, that's not really a huge roadblock, but in other communities down south, that is kind of a big roadblock for housing development, but we're kind of following suit with that type of thing, and also building an online tool. But in financial incentives that we're proposing through this housing action plan and all the kind of different tiers for those incentives, it kind of has this big spider web feel to it. So we want to build an online tool that kind of weaves that and kind of has all the logic built in for those things. So somebody can just punch in what they intend on building and see what they're eligible for and how much they're eligible for, kind of make that easy. So I'm using some technology to make the process quite a bit easier for somebody who wants to develop housing. And then other goals like collaborate and build partnerships, people who can advance kind of the actions in this plan. Always kind of look for those funding opportunities like the Housing Accelerator Fund or Building Faster Fund, whatever we can kind of get our hands on, we're gonna go after. Using data to monitor, using kind of the housing needs assessment, that type of data to look at, kind of continual monitoring and planning and making this better. And then educating and kind of awareness in the public and the community. We won't get too much into those. So the maps that we were talking about, so we're considering those strategic development areas, or these are areas that we want to really be the focus for intensification, higher density housing, mixed uses, higher density residential. And we want to kind of infill, right? Like there's a lot of vacant parcels within those areas, and we want to use that to for infill residential development. So, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why we might want to do that, reducing urban sprawl. Want to maximize the use of municipal infrastructure and services. A lot of cases, there's a vacant property and there's municipal services all around it. So you're not creating a new road, you're not creating new things. You're just tapping into that existing infrastructure. So it's economical, it's efficient in that way. Basically, and typically in those areas as well, there's the public transportation network. There's it's quite accessible there. Active modes of transportation, cycling, walking network is already kind of built into that area. So it makes sense to infill in those areas where that already exists. So the first map that we're looking at here, this shows kind of our two different levels of strategic development areas. One of which is that maroon color, which includes downtown and the area around the steel plant, which is, I mean, this is just kind of proposed.
Yeah,
And
nothing's finalized.
this may change based on quite a bit of public input that we received from the community. They're saying, why are you trying to intensify around the steel plant, which is a valid concern. But basically the maroon or dark areas would be considered what we're considering the first neighborhoods of the city. So they're kind of the initial settlement areas of the city. They have the oldest housing stock, like we were talking about. And, the goal for this area is to kind of continue to become a vibrant, resilient, diverse community. These are areas that potentially haven't received that much investment in a long time. And they have a lot of houses that are in need of major repair. So we're proposing this to be the area for kind of like the highest financial incentive, highest value financial incentives, most investment through this plan. The orange areas are where we're considering major node areas. So these are areas that have a lot of amenities and services nearby. So within a safe walkable distance, for example, to something like a grocery store. Where if you can kind of picture where the grocery stores are in the community, you can kind of, if I were to plot them on the map, it kind of surrounds all the grocery stores, to be honest. They are a major driver of that, right? And I mean, a safe walkable distance to a grocery store, it's been identified as something that's quite important, right?
And the goal, I think, is to also to try to expand these nodes. So for example, if we were to put a crosswalk, a PXO somewhere, could we bring the Algoma University area in? Or could we expand a node west or east or north with the simple act of putting in a traffic light or a crosswalk, or even a catwalk that all of a sudden brings that neighborhood into that safe walkable distance. So, right? Yes.
When you said around the steel plant, were you talking Jamestown or Bayview?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah.
No grocery stores, all downtown.
Right, no, absolutely. So that's been identified. So those were included in kind of an initial project of the first neighborhoods project, but we're starting to think that those maybe don't belong, or I should say Bayview and the areas maybe in the west end near the steel plant, kind of abutting that steel plant industrial land. Maybe they shouldn't be there, but that's yet to be determined.
Go ahead.
Safe walkable distance, sir.
Say 800 meter, yeah, it would be an 800-meter distance.
Like that distance may vary depending on someone in this room will.
Yes.
800 meters is not, for me, that's doable. For Derek, I think that likely be doable in good weather.
Yeah.
Sidewalk concerns as have been discussed.
Yeah.
So just wanted, when you, for future reference, if you're, and you folks know what you're talking about, the rest of us are a little.
So it's defined as
Sorry.
800, you're an 800-meter walk without having to cross a major arterial road that's in an unsignalized intersection.
Gotcha.
Recognizing that there are gaps in the pedestrian infrastructure in these areas, but the goal is to really focus pedestrian infrastructure.
Thank you. No, that's
a great
one
question.
thing about
Yeah.
professional terms of reference or jargon, gentlemen, is that
Mm-hmm.
as long as I know I could do 800 meters on a good day in good weather, I'm good. December, not so much.
Yesterday, not so good, huh?
No, yesterday was a day to put on a pot of tea and read something. I wasn't wandering about the neighborhood.
For sure, yeah, thanks for that story.
No, it's just, I just like to know what, I can determine. Just 800 maybe, but that's just one of those things. The more precise you can be with an open crowd, the better.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry about the delay.
So anyway, these are the areas that we kind of want to see the most infill development in, or most high density development. The yellow area around is the rest of the urban settlement area, which, I mean, there would still be financial incentives for housing there as well. There's general density, that kind of thing, but in terms of financial incentives, the higher values will be in areas that are maroon and.
Mine too.
So this map actually, it's the same map, but it shows areas that were potentially in a node, but they were missing something. So those teal areas basically show the potential to become part of that orange area or major node area, but there's some kind of gap. So in some cases by the Sioux Area Hospital, a gap would be, it is somewhat close. It's within 800 meters to say Walmart grocery store, for example, or a retail cluster there. But it's actually not, if you look at the walking, there's no pathway to get there. So you have to walk out to Great Northern Road, down Great Northern Road and back into Walmart. It looks like it's close on a map, but actually that walking distance is quite significant. So it closes off that neighborhood, yes. And exactly, so there may
If
be
you go the back way,
situations.
like I'm thinking, if you go behind, like where the El Cibo is and Home Depot, if you go that way.
No, you're right. So there are some gaps there. There's a gap to the walking network there that kind of closes off that neighborhood, which has quite large vacant parcels as well.
So there might be a good spot to put in some sidewalks.
Exactly.
Counselor, just,
Yeah,
that comes under the municipal rubric, does it not?
It would.
No, but
so it's just trying to look at the community in a bit of, through a different lens, right? When you look,
planner's eye.
when you look at the far east of the community, we've got some density and we've got some more density on the way in the DC Road area, but you're like a $30-40 cab ride to, right? You're a ways away. So in the far east end of town, the gap there is really a grocery store, as well as, I think institutional services as well. And similar on the west, on Second Line West, right? We've got subsidized housing units out at Allen Side Road, Second Line West. You're not anywhere near a grocery store. I mean, you're not crazy far away. You're not within that safe walkable distance, not either. So it's, there's also gaps to those areas.
Right, so you'd be relying on the bus or public transit or taxi or whatever, pretty much for every service or amenity
That you need.
if you lived out there, whereas in those orange areas, it's all nearby, within that safe walkable distance of 800 meters. So it's available to you in that area. So if you didn't have a car, you'd have an easier time there. So that's kind of the idea behind the strategic development areas. And then the general density portion of the Grove of Sioux project, this is obviously, I mean, undertaking zoning changes that would have the potential to increase the housing supply throughout the city, throughout residential areas. Like we were talking about the additional dwelling units, pre-existing neighborhood, you have a house, you're not using all that house. Convert the basement quite easily into an additional dwelling unit into a rental unit. So that can be something that can be done fairly economically, and that would be a good opportunity for, say, affordable housing. That's one idea, and then multiplexes, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, permitting those in more zones, permitting more units on a single parcel. And then just benefits are listed there. Affordability, you're not building brand new buildings in some cases, you're adding on to existing buildings, that type of thing. So it could be a more economical way to add housing.
So basically on these, the province has mandated municipalities have to permit up to 3 dwelling units on every urban residential lot. The feds have come out and been quite clear. When the Prime Minister was in town a few weeks ago, he met for 15 minutes with the mayor, and that's the one thing that he said. He said, if you're gonna get access to the federal dollars that we've applied for, you've got to go to 4. So up to 4 dwelling units on every urban residential lot. Obviously subject to performance standards, right?
Right.
Setbacks,
Yeah.
lot coverage, things of that nature. So we're actually going to council with it, it's an informational report next week.
Monday.
To talk about, and then we're hoping to go at the end of January with the zoning amendments that would put this into place. So that again, subject to performance standards, up to 4 dwelling units on any urban residential.
Comes the,
That's a really good way to do it.
becomes your baseline from.
Yeah, and so what,
Single development, yeah.
yeah, and what they, really the soundbite is I mean, we're gonna keep the R2 zone, but there's no such thing, and even now, there's no such thing as a single detached residential area. Everybody pretty much has the right now locally to put a second unit in. And we're now being kind of mandated provincially for the 3rd unit, federally for the 4th unit. Again, subject to development standards like setbacks, and where it used to be, they called them accessory dwelling units, and there was this sort of prominence piece, right? Where you had a main unit, and then the accessory unit had to be smaller, and you couldn't make it look a certain way, and that's all gone, so there's no prominence anymore, it's just. You can have 4 units on the lot, whether it's 2 in your house and then 2 in another unit, or 4 separate units, or 3 in 1, or 1 in 3, like it's 4 units.
They've left it wide open pending the CMHC design book they were talking about last night, go back to certain pre-approved designs. I don't know if that federal minister, I don't know how far along that is, but going back to the wartime housing.
That's the
Model.
province that I think is doing.
I was gonna say, I thought
Was it, okay, I thought it was, maybe it's both,
could be both.
yeah, but they're looking at pre-qualifying designs. So you may get in the crane business, because you can just probably walk these things in your backyard.
Or prefab them. Yeah, I would think I think there are companies in town that have ability to do that, right? That might.
Speed things up.
It would, if you had pre-approved, yeah, I mean, that's the whole discussion we had earlier about how long it takes to put something up.
Mhm.
But so, I mean. It doesn't help the folks on the wait list right now. Which is. I think there are more than 1,700 folks who qualified for them.
So this is kind of what Peter's mentioning, it's, no, that's okay. It's basically bringing our zoning bylaws into conformity with Bill 23, which has all these changes for the province. Again, to allow more units on any residential lot, and then just looking at kind of the regulations within the zoning. Size and frontage and setbacks and all those things. See how we can change those a bit to add more housing units in there. Just that's kind of the regulatory flexibility piece within there. So that's really all. I mean, that's kind of the nutshell of general density. And the last thing I just wanted to talk about was required parking reductions. We had a consultant looking at downtown, expanded that to the entire city. Just taking a parking review of the entire city just to see, do our requirements make sense? In terms of, say, for residential, 1.25 parking spaces per unit, or is it something that should be reduced to 1 space per unit, for example? That would save quite a bit of space, and think of a larger development having to provide like a really big parking lot. Is that necessary?
But, okay, so you're saying so the family, and nowadays both people have to work, they both need a vehicle. And you're saying, well, now what, guess what, 1 car.
Well, that would be a required parking, right? So they'd be required to have 1, and they could have more than that. It's up to.
And yeah, but where we park it, yeah, you can have as many as you want, yeah.
Yeah, so right now, like a single house like that would be 1.25, which would be rounded down to 1. We're talking about kind of when you add more units together on the same property, the requirements go up.
Yeah. But
So,
again, they're still allowed 1 parking lot per unit,
right,
even though 2 people that work and 1 is going this way and 1 is going that way.
Yeah.
You get 1 vehicle, it's like going backwards. Cause you need 2 incomes to afford that darn house.
no, that's true. So yeah, this would be like how many are actually required by the zoning bylaw.
That's a fair comment. We're hearing, I don't know if you have more slides on parking lot.
Yeah.
Okay, good. It's actually potentially more than 1, so. I'll note that these reductions won't apply to barrier-free spaces. So barrier-free spaces, places that have looked at doing this, barrier-free spaces, you'll have a separate ratio that basically keeps them the way they are. At this point, the recommendation on the table, and this is just a recommendation on the table, is 100, so no minimum parking requirements in our downtown, which is kind of where we're right now. That's the recommendation of our consultant, and that's municipalities across the province are going this way in their downtowns. In our strategic development areas, which in theory you can live and not necessarily have to have the 2 vehicles because you have access to service and employment. We're proposing a 40% reduction, so that would basically mean actually less than 1 space per unit. And then the rest of the urban settlement area would be 20% reduction, which from a residential standpoint would be 1 space per unit. And really what this is, we're not saying to developers, there's also been a push for us to have maximum parking requirements, but we're not interested in going there. The rationale in the downtown is that the city maintains a lot of parking spaces, and we actually have, I think it's a bit of a fallacy to say that we have a shortage of parking downtown, because our stats suggest that we actually don't have a shortage at all. And that like our lots tend to be 20, 30, 40% occupancy. Yeah, I think it's a bit of a fallacy, like it's not as intuitive as let's say parking at Walmart and going in. But when you actually look at it, and we use like a 200-meter radius around our public lots. When you look at Walmart, you gotta go to the back of Walmart and you park like close to the front doors, you're walking close to 200 meters, so I mean, it's a different walk, it's a. Yeah.
I'm healthy enough, I need to walk. Yeah, it's not a problem, I'm just thinking downtown. You're saying that there's plenty of parking downtown.
Yeah, there is.
And that's. If we.
I think it's a perceived parking problem. I'd like to maybe get us to a point where we actually have a parking problem. Then the thing with these parking, like we can dial them down right now, we can dial them up pretty quick too, right? So if we are having issues with it, so we're actually looking at kind of swinging for the fences, so to speak, on the parking, because parking eats up a lot of space. It costs developers and the city a lot of money. And really what this does is it almost disassociates parking with development.
But how many people have refrained from going down because they feel, I'll never get any parking anyway?
You know what, man?
Why there's tree lighting and there's no way we would even think of going down there because parking issues.
I've never gone downtown and not been able to get a parking spot in my whole life.
But how far from your destination? You can get close to your destination. Really?
Oh, yeah, even when
That's good.
Greyhound games and stuff, not bad.
Well, I haven't been to the hockey game, so I'm usually at the other end.
So if you are at the east end, that is where we like where the parking shortage is the most acute. It's in the first block between Pim and, well, the first 2 Pims would be where the parking is the tightest.
Well,
Based on
I did
what
go
ours-
to the mill market, the parking there, wonderful, absolutely plentiful, very happy in there. Yeah, it was really, really good, and it was a busy day, like they were
Mhm.
wall-to-wall people inside. And we had no problem with parking or anything, easily accessible,
And you talking about the new mill market or the old mill market?
the new one on Queen.
That's my experience too. I parked on Queen at the first available parking spot and then walked past like 35 empty parking spots in order to get to the market. Yeah.
Bay Street parking. Park out there.
Yeah.
And it was great, and again, Walker, visual, easy to get in,
Mhm.
no, we had no problems at all.
And there's a bit of a, call it a land use nexus, maybe, I don't know if I'm using the word right, but what we're doing here is we're trying to create demand for our active transportation infrastructure. So that there is true demand for that infrastructure. And this really lays the foundation for that.
One step at a time. Let's get going.
Andre's gonna love you guys.
He does. Well, it's not so far enough, but
He'd like a fleet car.
no, he'd like it quite a bit further than the big one, but.
There's the other side, there's this side.
I think this is it, yeah, that's, so
Let's just back up to that then, because I would like to open the floor a little bit for questions or comments. the one with 100% reduction. Cause I have several comments and several questions.
Mhm.
If I can just charge a hater, but I don't want to go first. But I will.
Go, Mr. Chair.
All right, good. First of all, guys, I think this is great, you know, like. Planners are notorious for making little incremental changes, we'll reduce the parking by 3.5%. Okay, so when you come out and say, we're gonna reduce it by 100%, like, be bold, you guys got it, this is big enough that we're gonna see a change here, hopefully. This really is, so I was very impressed with that. The other thing, and I don't know where it fits in this at all, in this discussion at all, and I don't know if you guys have considered it or not considered it, but. A number of years ago, I had a developer tell me, I'd love to build stuff downtown. He said, the problem is I can't assemble a lane.
Mhm.
It's just, it doesn't work, you know, if I need to buy 4 or 5 houses, I can get 3, but that other guy, man, he's at $500,000 now, right? Under the old urban renewal programs, which we won't discuss, but there was funding available to acquire land, and then the city then sold the property at a discounted rate.
Yeah.
With the funding that's available out there, any possibility of doing that to create rental housing in the downtown? Because like,
Mhm.
yeah, I know that the new owners of Station Mall are thinking, hey, maybe we could do something. I know Northern Brewery's property, hey, maybe we could do something there.
Yeah.
Petro-Canada is still locked, I think, in.
Yeah.
Petro-Canada's ownership, so
Yeah.
that's another
Yeah.
story. But, you know, there's a number of older houses. Albert Street North,
Mhm.
has there been any thought at all to having the city actually acquire those houses?
So.
And I'm saying, I recognize this only works.
Yeah.
This only works if we can use federal and provincial funding for this, I get that.
One of the big projects that is part of the housing action plan, and it's gonna start with publicly owned lands. And we're looking at that now, and we're hoping to roll that out probably February, March-ish.
Does public owned include federal, provincial?
Well, we start with the city, so the feds in the province have made their own mandates to say that. They're gonna look at
Okay.
disposing of federal or provincial lands, and I would think that would include. School boards who are hanging on to some pretty nice pieces of property, that they don't really necessarily need to be hanging on to, but.
Like the King George.
That's the one I'm thinking of, right, which has huge potential, so we're gonna start with city-owned land. And that would include, like, we've got some really big park space, and this is could be a slippery slope, right, I understand that, but. We've got certain parks that are really big and are quite built up around them, and you're not seeing, Highland Park comes to mind, right, the one in behind. Lake Avenue.
Yeah, it used to be a hockey rink there.
Yeah,
It's
it's
a rink in for.
probably 3 times, 4 times bigger than it needs to be. You can carve off 5%, let's say the south.
Put the playground in, right? Put the playground
At the
in.
north end.
Yeah. It's a big part.
And when you start really looking at city-owned lots, there's actually quite a bit. Even in the downtown, right, so think, where Studio 10 used to be, the city owns that whole lot, that's a pretty significant piece of property that could be redeveloped. Potentially right beside a future bus terminal, when you start looking at it, there's actually quite a bit of city land that will be out there, and we're gonna look at. Finding it, declaring it surplus, and then maybe having like potentially an RFP process.
We still own the gateway, so.
Gateway site. Yeah. And then the next step would be looking at sort of underdeveloped private lands, and then that might include. Kind of what they call land banking, I think is the term that they're using. So the city kind of comes in and starts being a bit of a developer, and actually start putting the lands together. And then again, you do kind of like an RFP process, right, to get what you want on that property.
And in the proposed financial incentives, and I know you guys are still starting to look at this, but, will there be financial incentives of some sort that are specific to accessible housing?
We're looking at that. We're not sure right now that the funding pots that we've applied to would specifically allow us to provide deeper incentives. The reality is, when we started this project, we didn't know about the funding pots, so.
You weren't there.
At some point, there was gonna be an ask to council, right? So we understand that there are things within the, plan that are currently unfunded. And those would be the things that we might go to council and ask for the funds for. And I don't think that it would be an astronomical amount of money. So absolutely, we recognize that, so the housing action plan has something in there to look at additional barrier free.
We would love to have an opportunity to comment on that at an appropriate time.
Yeah,
And my understanding, when I meeting this morning, my understanding is the units in the tech, now I gotta confirm this, my understanding is I was told they're all barrier free.
well, he did, so I don't know if they all are, but I did put a request in for Roma to speak to the disability minister about it. So. I can,
And it was on
we'll see
the,
if I get the.
it was on the last annual agenda, but I'm not sure the degree to which that it was discussed, it was.
It
more
wasn't,
of
I didn't go,
a-
I went to a portion of a disability discussion and it was not very robust.
Okay.
Peter, you just mentioned the tech, did you mean Windsor Park?
No,
No, no.
that's. So those,
The old
my
one.
understanding is those 60 units, they all have roll-in. Or they're all designed, or they haven't built them yet, but the design, so I gotta confirm with building as to whether, cause he's gonna come in for the
He's putting.
city.
Then
It's in already,
it's a, yeah, and they were thinking February, January start.
start construction.
Yeah.
So that'll be 60 units that they're saying meet the barrier-free width for doors. Railings and roll-in bathrooms, but I don't know if it technically meets the building code, I gotta confirm that with our building guy.
I think if he doesn't, he's supposed to put that in the Windsor Park too, isn't he?
Yeah,
Yeah, like this is not really a first for him.
no, and so that would be 60 units right there.
And he's doing 100 units initially.
Is he doing 100 initially?
Only
or is it-
100, but I thought maybe
Okay.
60 are gonna be barriers
Okay,
and then 40 not,
maybe,
which would make sense.
yeah,
And this is on the second and third floor, and the original part of the tech.
yes.
Yeah.
The west side.
That's a great project.
Mhm. We're hopeful that maybe the provincial funding might specifically allow for that. When I looked at the.
That would be great.
I sort of felt like maybe, because that's how they're consulting on that fund is through AMO, which is. Kind of
Unusual.
different, but the government, this government's unusual in a lot of the things that
Yeah.
they do, so.
Very good, well said, Peter.
Yeah, conventional practice is not in the hallmark.
No.
of government,
No.
that's not a political statement,
No.
they do things different, they do,
Yeah, that way.
no, they do things in an unconventional way.
Exclude part of it.
I have a question for Peter and Claire, sorry.
Go ahead.
Have you seen anything about the old moves IGA, it's just before Boots Hill?
No.
They took the sign down,
I have not heard of anything about it.
they took the sign down and. So they must be ready to build something.
I haven't heard anything on that.
To the call center.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If they're doing, thinking or whatever of all these places downtown. There's a. Me way an incentive can be to put. Some grocery store to go down.
Yeah, that's an interesting.
Yeah.
thought.
That's kind of the next step for us, right, so. Kind of two ways to look at it, if you build a bunch of residential down there, which I think we're gonna see, and that's a focus of downtown. Development right now is to get more residential. Ideally. You build it, they will come, but part of the discussion that I think the next step that we're thinking about, okay, is there incentives that we can put in? And it's not really, I mean, the downtown's the big one, but also you look at Daisy Road, Second Lane West, there are other. Sort of residential nodes that have higher density residential that have no commercial activity.
Food deserts, that's.
It is, it
Yeah.
was, it's fine, G's on Gore Street, you just do a bunch of little G for G.
Yeah.
I would just do like one maybe really big cheaper too.
You gonna run it?
But Don, you recall the old MJ Daisy School, they had tried to do a little bit of commercial on the ground floor in there and just didn't work out for
No,
them. I'm not sure why, but,
competition is huge. I mean, you got Food Basics.
Yeah.
Competition.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, the Food Basics is way cheaper to buy Curry coffee at compared to anybody else in town. That's my-
And many years ago, somebody was looking at, his first name was Albert, and he was looking
I
at
know,
the St. Hubert School, and that's what he wanted to do with it,
I know,
was turn it into a commercial mall,
I know.
and,
My dad bought Daisy School and then resold it for anywhere.
right, the MG Daisy,
Yeah.
but he also looked at St. Hubert
Yeah,
to
he
do
did,
that,
yeah.
and that was a bit ahead of his time, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, if he would have paid his taxes. he would have made-
Carol, go ahead.
Well, it's just that years ago, there used to be grocery stores on like every block down.
Right.
Yeah,
You know, now there's nothing. And,
I was just at City Meat Market today. And I.
people
have-
on fixed income,
Go to G for G.
okay, a lot of fixed income cannot afford it.
If they can.
Bananas
are $3.50.
Oh, and you're-
Oranges are a quarter.
on Ward Street, yeah, I've never been there. Yeah, and
Very
I do need to go.
I'm gonna apply for that.
But if I'm gonna do grocery, you need a bigger place, that's what you need.
Well, I need more money. Well, I'm getting some money.
But the basics are essential, it's the bread, the milk, a few fruits and vegetables, it's the.
You're gonna come volunteer for us. I keep trying to-
But it really needs something down, there. There's just too many people down there that. Fixed income, you know. Affordable housing, they can't even afford the rent. Yeah, you know, it's.
Carol, I would say over 90% of our client base is seniors on fixed.
Yeah, that's,
Have the G for G.
Yeah.
Wouldn't doubt.
Can you describe? And like where it is, I know it's on Gore.
147 Gore. I walked away to get caught, 147.
Oh, okay. So what block is it on? Is it from,
It's just past, Albert.
towards,
You know, before the North Princess Theater.
northwest corner.
now is it on the same side as Princess Theater?
Yeah.
So where Capri Beauty Salon used to be,
It's
or?
up from there. It's the same building, actually, so.
Oh, it used to be a billiards or something, or a pawn shop?
I knew.
let's do this, let's
Yeah.
wrap our meeting up,
Yeah.
and then we do have a social aspect to this, and people can stay in. And we can chat. I just to clarify one thing for the committee though, and that is when, you know, when you're saying there's 100% reduction in parking requirements for the downtown, that doesn't mean nobody is ever gonna have parking. What it means is the developer will decide how much parking does he need for his business, right? It doesn't mean that he can't have parking.
Civic bylaw that we,
The bylaw will be to zero, but the developer can still, and this was a problem we had with Station Mall for years. Because you say Station Mall had this giant sea of parking, why didn't you guys build something else? And the answer was, because they had Zellers at one end of Station Mall and Sears at the other. And they were saying, here's the parking you must have. And even Walmart, when we first built Walmart, Peter, you remember that, when we first built Walmart.
The second piece, but
The second
know-
piece, the
yeah.
first, Walmart said, we need 6 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet, so then we just multiply all this out, to how many parking spaces we need. And we're like, oof, that's a lot of parking, dude, I don't think you really need that. That's the rules, and they weren't moving, but then they did move, when they came back, and they said, we'll reduce our parking somewhat, because we're gonna put a 50,000 square foot food addition on. And that's what they did. But I mean, they're calling the shots. I don't want people to think,
Yeah.
okay, we're not gonna have any parking, we're all automatically parking gonna disappear. All new developments have the option of parking.
And a lot of the communities that did the 100% reduction in downtown, they actually, for larger residential developments, we've looked, they still have it. So we are looking, other communities, so North Bay, for example, Kingston is another one, they have no minimum parking in the downtown requirement if you're in the downtown. But if you're, I think if you're a residential development of 5 or less units, you're no minimum, but as the minute you get to 6 or more units, they have, maybe it's 0.3 or 0.5 spaces per unit, so we are looking at some of those.
And they still have to meet the barrier requirements.
The barrier-free requirements, our goal is to not change them. So when we go, we are looking at a bit of a transitional parking reduction, so we're not 100% sure when we're gonna come to council with the parking reductions, like definitely within the next 3 months. But we are gonna be coming to council on January well, next week as like an FYI, and then
Yeah,
January 28th to amend the zoning bylaw to allow the 4 units.
Mhm.
And we are proposing to go from 1.25 spaces per unit to 1 per unit approximately.
Makes lots of sense.
that makes it, how do you want to? Like.
So what we'll do with the barrier free, and that's just a bit of a transitional thing, the barrier free will go, it's residential is basically percent. We'll go from 6 to 8%, and we kind of run that. And it works out with the rounding,
Yeah.
it works out that there's no change. Because you're reducing the number of parking space, you want to keep the barrier free as it is now, you have to up the percentage, right? So we're gonna go from 6 to 8% is what we're proposing.
Got it.
So when you look at the numbers, it works out when you start
Yeah.
rounding things up. Yes, thanks.
Okay,
I love our downtown.
So do I.
It's gonna get better.
Yeah.
can we move on? We have three other items under new business. And then,
Table, all of the other items. They were
January.
intended to be fillers, but I didn't realize it'd be an hour and almost 45 minutes.
sorry,
Which is great, because it's very important.
it is, I think this is gonna really be conversation.
Yeah,
I think
but
we
the
can-
other items were kind of fillers.
In that case, we need to do two things. One, we need to adjourn. But before we do that, I do want to thank everybody for their participation and involvement with this committee this year. This has been kind of a new sort of change from where the committee has in the past. Diane is absolutely great. We have a number of new members on the committee who haven't been here before. We also have a few who've been here for a year or two, a couple of years. We won't go into details. But I do wanna thank everybody. In particular, I wanna thank Derek, who chaired our site plan committee, and Carol, who is a terrific participant in our site plan committee. They have done just tremendous amount of work above and beyond what the committee sees. And that's really great. And I think that's really. And most importantly, I think Diane has been phenomenal and really just this is your first full year on the job. And the whole accessibility program is moving forward. All sorts of fun things to look forward to. So. To everybody, we had a wonderful Christmas. And I still need a mover and a seconder to adjourn this meeting, and Lisa and Diana, and that's fine, and we're all in favor, great, thank you very much.
There's lots of food.
And there's lots of food. And I do wanna thank, Steve and Peter for coming too, that was really interesting.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
I just love what you guys are doing.
Thanks.
Like I say, be bold, charge bold,